Welcome back. So this is the discussion we're getting into now. So a woman who was traveling with her children was verbally intimidated by a taxi marshal for giving a lift to a pedestrian. That video has made the rounds on social media. Now the situation took a surprising turn when TikTok content creator, also taxi operator, stepped in. Using his platform, he tracked down the individuals involved, reported the incident to the relevant association, and publicly apologized on behalf of the taxi industry for the distress the woman and her family experience. But the story quickly gained traction on TikTok, sparking discussions and shedding light on the power of social media in addressing and raising awareness about such incidents. Now, of course, the incident itself was a woman driving with her child, picking up a pedestrian to give them a lift, and then accosted by a taxi marshal who then demanded a fine. And if that fine was not paid, he said he would take her car keys. Let's take a look at the TikTok video.
Bangak bantu abagcotsha amadilika tshele bebangazi.
Mina bengathi.
Bangak bantu abagcotsha amadilika tshele bangazi. Abangazi lutho. Baningi awuzwe. Nawe uboshe ungaza ngisho. So ngiyacela yenza kunye. Ujikisa imoto or ngithatha isikhiya ngiyasishayela.
Le office nizokwendani?
Sokhuluma ngisho ngikhuluma indaba estradini mina uzawuxolisela office njikisa imoto sakho. Jikisa imoto.
Well, taxi operator Kotola Mdleje stepped in and sparked quite a discussion on social media after seeing that clip of that very concerning incident, that woman accosted by a taxi marshal. And you see him in that clip, of course, demanding her car keys or a fine. Here's how Kotola stepped in.
Hello?
Putomdala.
Yes, good.
Awukafinyeleli ngakhona lenke.
Awutroke kancane sengifikile mara bona basengefike ebhudo kungibona.
Okay.
Ya kancane nje futhi ungathi emanyanyana mina sengifikile.
Okay Putomdala.
Ya ngifuna ukuthi ibeke le ndaba njengoba umtshelile ngibatshele ukuthi kunenkinga leso ngifonelwa ngumuntu
Yeah.
Ngicabanga umntana impendulo bese uyayithola ke lapho kubantu abafanele mhlawumbe ungakhuluma nabo.
Hayi ngiyazibongela Putomdala. Mhlambe ngabuye emva kwesikhathi esingakanani?
Hawu mina futhi uzawubuza ngishwe ukuphendula ngimuntu olebe no osekubhele nje kube mhlawumbe ukhuluma na-PRO noma nebaphathi besofise nje nabe kunona mhlawumbe uzayithola.
Ngiyabonga Putomdala.
All right. Now we are, of course, joined in studio this morning by taxi operator Mr. Kotola Mdleje, who is, of course, the man that we see in that video stepping in, wanting to remedy the situation. Mr. Mdleje, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the agenda.
Yeah, what's up, ma'am?
We're also joined via Teams by Santaco National spokesperson Rebecca Phala, who's going to be speaking to us about really the policy of Santaco when it comes to taxi marshals approaching drivers who are giving lifts to pedestrians. We're also joined by the woman that we see in that video, the victim of that incident, Ms. Dumisile Shabangu. And we'll bring the two ladies in a moment, but I want to start with our guest in studio, Mr. Mdleje. Mdleje, good morning to you once again. Uyibone kanjani le video ka usisi uDanisile, and when you saw it, what were your first thoughts?
Hey, kusho ukuthi nje izinto ziningi lapha ku TikTok ngithe kwabantu abaningi kakhulu kule video le ekade yenzeka kasisi. Lokho akuzange kungijabulisa ngoba okokuqala nje umuntu wesifazane, okwesibili uhamba nezingane, okwesithathu ubexolisa esho ukuthi akazi la ukuthi akulayisha wabehlisa labo bantu labo. Kodwa manje ubhizi ubhuti lo uyamprovoke uthatha isikhiye semoto. So lento yangiphatha kabi kakhulu ngoba embonini yamatekisi ayisekho lento eyenza abantu besifazane bathathwa ngezinga eliphezulu kakhulu. Kungimangazile ukubona umuntu wesilisa enobudlobonga obungaka kumuntu wesifazane engabuyena akamvikelayo uma esethe ngiyaxolisa kusuke sekuphelile lapho.
Yeah, of course, Mr. Mdleje essentially saying that his concern was around seeing the marshal approaching not just a woman, but certainly a woman who was traveling with a child, saying that we should be protecting women and not treating them badly. Especially if we are drivers, are there rules that say that asikwazi ukuthi si pick up ama pedestrian emgaqweni?
Imithetho yaserenki ikhona. eqinisweni eduze nje kwaserenkeni noma la kuhanjwa khona mhlambe la kusebenzela khona amateksi akuthathwa before uzothatha umuntu uyaye ucele kulabo abasuke bekhona eduzane ukuthi ngicela ukuthatha nanga umuntu ngiyamazi wangasekhaya then uyamthatha uyahamba kodwa ke usisi wenze ngoba ubhuti umtholile ebamba labo ethatha labo bantu then usisi wabehlisa bese singekho isidingo sokuthi amlwise ngoba ubesemehlisile lo muntu loyo so waqhubeka yena wamlwisa okuyinto embike ngoba usisi uyasho ukuthi bengingazi ngicela ungixolele akafuni kwakuzwa umbalela ngokuthi bangaka abantu begwetshwa bengazi ukhuluma nomuntu wesifazane njalo leyo nto le ngiphatheka kakhulu wangibone sengibona izingane ngendlela ade ziphendula ngakhona khona lencane ngibonile ukuthi le ngane ibe ne trauma ukubona le nto yenza ngoba ibe nama question amaningi abantu besifazane nezingane kulezi insuku kumele ukuthi bavikelwe kungabonakala into enjengaleya ekade yenzeka embonini isishintshe kakhulu imboni yamatekisi.
All right, Mr. Mdletshe, they're essentially saying that, well, there are rules when you are near a taxi rank, and that is if you are to pick up someone in the vicinity of a taxi rank, you are expected to ask permission or inform taxi marshals that is what you intend to do. But his biggest concern, of course, that he's raising is the way that this particular marshal was speaking to Usis Danisile and how he, was, I suppose, intimidating her in front of her child, saying that his greatest concern, of course, was how the child seemed to have been traumatized as well by the incident. But let's bring in Danisile herself. Danisile Chabango is the woman that we see in that video. So Danisile, good morning to you. Thank you for speaking to us. Take us through what actually happened and your memory of, the very beginning when you picked up the pedestrian and when things started to take a turn.
Morning, Naledi. Yeah, we are speaking with Dumsile Chabango here. Yeah, it happened on the 16th. I was with my kids, and then being driver from Entlazaj, Senya Endlin. So there was a guy, a young boy. I think he is 16 or 17. Then in a driver near Wabaton. Okay, nyambona guy ang mad. Then I was with my daughter. She's 20. Then my daughter athi mama ungamshilo wala sihlala khona. Okay ngibrike. Ngimele mfana abuyi. The moment ngima mfana agibela lapha iqhamuka imoto. Imoto lemhlophe lebhalwe angathi or VIP security yeah. Ime imoto then kwase 3 men bese baphethe tibhanga by 3 then la by 2 behla baphethe tibhanga. The other one ehle ete emotweni yami makafika emotweni yami azange ngibulisi wavela wavula sivalo ngemuva wagibela emotweni wasika I says njengoba wena uyasebenza ungidriver wemateksi drive itaxi manje siyajika serenkini ofisini uyokhuluma lapha ukhipha imali uyofina 1.5 ukuthi wena udayisha abantu and wena using taxi driver ngisi mina info bengingathi ngisi kumfana yehla mfana lokho nakhamba ngoba manje sengisenkingeni sefuna ngibhadale imali ngoba ngilayisha wena asi lo mfono angehli umuntu ngisi mina yehla mfana umfana ehle ke from lapho ke siqale kulo athi wena awungihloniphi ngisi umuntu ungamehlisi uyamehlisa okay ngisi okay what manje senda in athi drive imoto mangabe uyahluleka drive imoto bisasikhiya mina ngidrive le moto siyahamba se-ofisini okay sihlalile lapha sikhathi eside silo then umna nami wa decide ukuthi athathe le video because lo guy bese ka angishawutha kakhulu kakhuluma kakhulu say umntana acabanga ukuthi utongishaya that's why I decide ukuthi athathe le video. Okay egcineni ngidecide ukuthi angijiki ngiye khona lapha erenkini ngile njengoba bekathi yena ngiya kubaphathi bakhe erenkini lapha mangifika ngehlile emotweni masikhipha sikhiye emotweni ngehla sahamba saya kulelo office azange kube khona abaphathi sikhuluma na bekungimi na guy aphinza akhulume the very same thing la ngitsheleyo nemgwaqweni athi 1.5 makuba uyakhala 1000 rand ngisi ngikutshelile mfo anginayo leyo mali athi sikhiye imnike sikhiye athathe sikhiye ahambe wahamba ngiyacabanga an hour ahambile ngihleli lapha ngize ngakhishwa ngilabanye bobaba basibacela kuba nemeeting ngilapho ngiphume khona ngaye emotweni mangifika emotweni ngithola abantu abami bayakhala ngoba bebangadi ukuthi ngiyakuphi. Even yena lona 20 bekangathi ukuthi ngiyakuphi. Bacala ukuthi mhlambe ngithathwa amaphoyisa ngiyaboshwa. Bekangathi vele ukwenzakalani. Khosa ngizange ngibuya. Sengibuya ngoba laba babamba meeting. Okay, mangifika laphana ngihlala esikhathi leside vele. Chamuke lo munye drive ngoba ngiserenkini engiphazamisa ama-taxi. Baloku bangicela sisiya phambili ngithi anginasikhiye. Okay, kufike lo munye bhuti ngidriver ukhona lapha. Esesithini isitori sakho? Ngithi mina nolana bathi ngiboshiwe ngoba bengilayisha umuntu. And then bangifuna 1.5 or 1,000 rand anginayo. Athi ngibani ngimkhombe lo bhuti beka around lapha ngithi ngulo. Ambide makamfika mbuti athi ebhuti manje sithini isitori salo sesi. Athi awungiyekele ngaloyo uyadelela. Avele ahamba angishiya. Lo bhuti angilayile lo munye usesi athi hayi wena sesihamba ukukhuluma nana ngiyasesi nangisebenza lapha officeini. Awunayo 300 rand. Ngithi mina 300 rand nginayo. Athi khuluma nalo sesi umnike 300 rand ngizokunika sikhiye. Hayi ngivele ngihambe ngiye kulo sesi ngifike ngikhulume naye ngimchazele
Okay.
Sengiyakhala ke lapho. Ngichazela lo sesi.
Okay, let's just pause there, Sister Danisile, so I can bring our viewers up to speed who are perhaps are not able to understand isiZulu. But essentially, Sister Danisile really breaking down what is quite a traumatic story from what we hear there. She was driving with her daughter in the car. She saw a young man on the side of the road. He looked about 16, 17 years old, considered giving him a lift, gave him a lift. And as soon as the young man entered the car, a vehicle that belongs to the taxi operators pulled up to her car. Two men stepped out. One of them immediately opened her car and stepped into the back of her car. In fact, at some point taking her car keys and demanding that she pay 1,500 rand or 1,000 rand. At some point even saying to her that you're being disrespectful. This is after she had told the young man that she was giving a lift to get out of the car. He subsequently at some point left. This is the man who had walked into the car with the taxi operating vehicle. Took her car keys and left her there for close to an hour as she spoke to various people who were operating in the area near a taxi rank, who were then asking her to move her car. She was unable to because she did not have the car keys, and at some point was being asked to pay 300 rand instead of 1,500 rand. She says at that point she was emotionally shook and close to tears. And we will get the rest of the story. But let's bring in Santako right now, because we've got with us, of course, the national spokesperson for Santako, Rebecca Pala. Rebecca, good morning to you. I mean, as Santako, the national organization that oversees what our taxis are doing in our communities, just listening to Sister Danisile's story, what are your thoughts?
Naledi, good morning, and to the viewers and the rest of the guests. The immediate thought is a feeling of dismay and embarrassment and a huge sense of concern that we've got this mushrooming, because this is not necessarily a new phenomenon. It used to be prevalent in the previous years, and then it sort of toned down and it's making a comeback now. We're very concerned. We first want to say to Usis Dunsile, we're very sorry that she had to experience that. And it is not in any way something that the taxi industry mandates, especially the people who work on the ground, to do. And we will make sure that she gets the necessary recourse. But I think, Naledi, I want to state it categorically that the taxi industry does not have any immunity or power to dictate to South Africans which mode of transport they must use. But we also appreciate the reality that some of the people who operate on the ground tend to do the opposite of what is supposed to be done. And the immediate thought that comes to mind, and something that we want everyone to understand, is we want South Africans to know that they have the right to call police. Because what was done to Sister Nsile and all the other people in the videos that have been shared on social media is an act of criminality, and it needs to be dealt with by law enforcement. The taxi industry only wants to ferry South Africans as mandated by the necessary legislation and in accordance with the driving licenses that people have. The marshals that we have in our different associations are supposed to be making sure that they complement the work that's done by law enforcement to ensure that our vehicles are roadworthy and that we don't have problems of overloading.
Right.
But unfortunately, it's seeming to be now bordering into other things where members, some amongst us, are deciding to now behave like criminals, and we're not going to tolerate it. It is not in keeping with what the taxi industry upholds.
Yeah.
And those that are found to be perpetrating this need to be facing the might of the law.
All right. Well, we're going to open up the lines, right? Give us a call on 011-714-0661 or tweet us at @theagenda_SABC. We're essentially having a discussion around whether or not you have faced any sort of harassment at the hands of taxi operators, particularly if you are a motorist picking up a pedestrian. Let's take a look at some of the tweets or X's that have already come in that handle @theagenda_SABC. We've got one that says, "Morning all. I once tried to give someone a lift between Brits and Rustenburg. Taxi operators chased after me, apprehended me, snatched the car keys from the ignition and demanded 500 Rand from me." That's Babi with that tweet. Boniseni says, "Good morning, Ladidi. For me, the challenge I encounter with those taxis is when they stop to pick inside the road, and when you try to pass on oncoming traffic, they start driving as well, and you'll be the one who is wrong when other cars approach you, okay?" Siabulela says, "Rudeness. I once took a taxi after thoroughly explaining my destination. The driver took a path that left me plus minus 3 kilometers away. The attitude when you get or give someone a lift in your car is something. They own the road. Lawlessness flourishes in that industry." And Lint Gam says, "I understand the frustration of many, but these people aren't always as bad as they are portrayed. I was once traveling to a place I wasn't familiar with, and I explained to the driver where the place was. He ended up dropping me off right where I was supposed to be." So keep the tweets coming in at @theagenda_SABC. Sister Nisile, I think I'll let you continue and finish off part of the story here about what happened next and how you were able to get your car keys back. But what we hear from Sister Rebecca Pala is that you could have called police. Did you feel like you were safe enough to do that? Was that an option at the time?
No, yes, at that time, I thought I should call the police, but then there's someone I know who's working at the police industry. Then I told him about that. He said to me, the policemen from Elukwatin, they allowed these people to so
that's concerning. You're shaking your head here in studio, Mr. Mdleche. I mean, essentially what Sister Nisile is saying is that taxi operators at taxi ranks are working with police. So umuntu ofana no Sister Nisile is not going to get any help.
Hey, uyabona sisi inzima kakhulu lento ngoba usisi uzame ngakho konke okusemandleni njengoba esho ukuthi uke wazama ibapha abantu abazovikela abantu besifazane uma namaphoyisa ebalahlela izandla. Awukwazi ukuthi umuntu ezoreporta ukuthi sengenzekele kanje kuthiwa hayi ivumelekile leyo nto leyo. Uvumelekile ukuthi uabuse umuntu wesifazane uma iphoyisa lizothi abaserenkeni abavumela lokho. Irong kakhulu ngoba into abayenzayo manje emarenkeni baqasha ama-security and lama-security ayingozi abawabeka lapha awazi nokuthi erenkeni kusetshenzwa kanjani. Ngicabanga ukuthi isikhathi manje sokuthi emarenkeni kusetshenzwe ngendlela ehlukile. Uma kuqasha umuntu owazi kakhulu ngendaba yerenk, kungaqasha umuntu from nowhere bese umuntu uthola ukuthi akazi ukuthi kufanele ahandlishe kanjani. Ukube bekuyimi kusisi lawyer bengizoyihandlisha ngendlela right leya situation ngoba erenkeni ngisebenza khona ngazi everything. So uyabona nje wakuthiwa i-VIP protection lama security asebenza lapha awazi next ngendaba yerenk. And baqasha abantu abangazi next ngendaba yerenk abazuthi kufanele kube izidlova angazi mawusuke ukhipha isibhamu ngalona iphoyisa ukhiphela umuntu wesifazane uthi akenzeni ngoba akakwazi ukuyilwela.
Okay, so Mr. Mdleche essentially saying that the real concern here is the security that's also deployed to these taxi ranks, essentially saying that the security that is deployed to these ranks themselves need to understand how the taxi industry and these ranks operate. Let me ask you this. You then went on to TikTok, because you're an influencer as well.
Yes, I am.
Why did you think it was important that you speak out? We hear Usis Rebecca Pala essentially saying, Nesantako aivumelani ngalama incident afana nalawo. But you yourself are saying that you needed to speak out. Mklambe, there's work that needs to be done and conversations that need to happen between taxi operators on the ground.
Uyabona sisi ngicabanga ukuthi embonini ukusukuma kwami ngingene ngisebenzisa social media ngendlela ngamandla wami ukuthi lo sisegcine sizakele. abantu besifazane ngendlela abayiyo abakwazi ukuzilwela abakwazi ukuzivikela and njoba kuhlale kusho kuthiwa khulumani ungaze ugcina ufile mina njengoba ngathatha i-decision yokungena ku social media ngashone lo baba ngisemncane kwi-industry le bebangumzila umzila washona ubaba angifune ezinye ingane zikhule njengami ngingenayo ubaba ngakhuliswa uma ngedwa uNkulunkulu ke wamnika amandla uma ngakhona ukuthi ngikhule ngizama ukuthi izingane lezi ezinobaba nomama zingakhulu zodwa afane nami mina engihluphekile kwenzeka yonke lento khona abantu abangakwazi ukuyikhulumela njengoba ngisukumile uassociation wale ngibafonelile I think noma uchairman noma ubani wakhuluma amanye amagama wakhuluma ukuthi uzongibulala uzosuka le eMpumalanga ngeze la eGoli ezongibulala ngamtshela ukuthi mina anytime ungeza la eGoli hayi ukuthi ngizobe ngicashile ngizobe ngikhona hayi ukuthi mhlambe ngiyabahlambalaza kodwa ngizama ukulungisa lento eyenzakalile yena ukhuluma ukuthi uzoza la eGoli ngixhumane nomunye udriver seMpumalanga ngathi awungisiza ungixhumanele nalaba ayikho inhlamba angamthuka ngayo wathi kulo usesekhunda udriver wakhona wathi kufana nokuthi kusekitchen lapho mangisuka la ngikhona ufana nomuntu osekitchen ufike ngizokubulala ngidlule lapho ngiyeGoli ngiyobulala uGodole ngathi mina nomi nini uze la eGoli ngoba ayikho into mina ngivikela ama passenger ngivikela abantu besifazane ngivikela izingane.
That's very concerning. So Mr. Mdletshe essentially saying that he stepped in because he felt it was important to protect women, and that's the role that we all have. Talks about having grown up with a single mother, and that's why he's so passionate about protecting women. But he then says that he approached the chairperson of the taxi association in the area where the incident happened, and that chairperson responded by threatening to take his life, saying that it would be a very easy thing for him to do. Ms. Rebecca Pala, I want to bring you in for this one, but first we're going to take a call. We have Vaslapi on the line in Walkerville. Vaslapi, good morning to you. What are your thoughts on this discussion? Thanks for calling.
Okay, Mama kunjani?
Siyaphila phuthi njani?
Ngiyaphila. Yazi bengicela uyangizwa?
Yes, I can hear you. Go on.
Yes. Lalela. Abantu bama-taxi they know ukuthi indaba yokumisa abantu estrateni mabalayisha abantu bayazi ukuthi ayicontribute abanelanga bayenze kanjalo. Yayenzeka nangapha kithi I'm sure ngabo November time. Abantu bayemiswa balayisha abantu banama club cap. We had to call iboto yafika nama councillors nani bonke bafika lapha baza batshela labantu bamateksi ukuthi you know the right thing. Lento leniyenzayo ayicontribute umuntu ugibela imoto ayifunayo ngesikhathi asifunayo irongo mangizohamba ngiyogibeza umuntu kuphi erenkeni but if angibeza umuntu erenkeni akunankinga lapho umuntu ugibela moto enkha ayithandayo ukuthi ufuna ukuhamba ngayo lento lebayenza it was wrong kulo taxi siyacela nje abantu bama-taxi basitophe leyo nto lokuhlukumeza abantu estratini because aba-own istrat aba-owna i-rank.
Yeah, thank you, Vaslapi. Thank you so much for calling in. Vaslapi essentially saying that in Walkerville, in his area, they had to approach government officials to step in and have a conversation with the taxi industry to try and convince them to stop the behavior of not allowing motorists to load pedestrians to give them a lift. We've got another caller, Tembinkosi in KwaZulu-Natal. Tembinkosi, thanks for calling in. A good morning to you. Yes, what are your thoughts?
Yebo sawona nje. Bengifuna ukuthi siyabonga kakhulu. Hello.
Yes, ngiyakuzwa bhuti ngakhuluma.
Yeah, bengifuna ukuthi ngithi siyabonga kakhulu kumfowethu uGodole ngani ngoba usezi elwela abantu abangakwazi ukuyilwela. Lento eqhubekayo iningi kakhulu ikakhulukazi la eKZN uma uhamba ngo-N2. Kunabantu abasethabhayo lapha ababekwa ngamabomu emgwaqweni ukuze bagade labantu abangazi abazothatha benze ngathi bathatha ama-list kanti babekiwe ukuthi uma wamthatha imoto siyalandela sebeyama bayakuboba bathatha imali ngokungemthetho uma ngabe benza iqiniso kufune ngabe bayabatshela abantu ukuthi abangabathatha abantu kube yiphela kodwa ke kunemali ezithathwayo ekudlalwa ngazo la besicela ukuthi association bangenelele ngempela ngani ngoba kuyatholakala ukuthi kuyayiwa nasemarenki kuyokhulunywa iyafika kubona kodwa abayilungisi lento iningi kakhulu kuthina.
Sabanga Kulu Upututembu Gosi calling in from KZN, essentially saying that he applauds Uput Kotole for doing the work that he has to raise awareness and protect the vulnerable that do use our taxis, and also imploring taxi associations to step in and really deal with those who are taking advantage of the vulnerable for the sake of money. One more caller, Anonymous on the line. Anonymous, good morning to you. Thanks for calling.
Morning, Manjani.
Siyabonga sisi, siyaphila. What are your thoughts?
Siyaphila siyahlukumeza kakhulu nje kakhulu, angifuni ukuqamba mankosi uma uthi uyabagolozela beqhamukela babahamba abasebethethe ibhamu o-KSS njengala empangeni nje uthi ukuthi ngampela awonanga futhi mhlawumbe uhayike ngoba kuphuthuma noma unayo imali. Bazixakazisa, they want to be like verbally abused by them. It's not working, it's not nice, and it's not safe for us. So we need government to intervene, because kulula ukuthi besho kanje TV njengoba uthi esho at the end of the day amabhokobhoko ahlukumeza wena.
Okay.
Intervene. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for calling in. Anonymous calling in, asking for government to step in and saying that this is a horrible situation for them to deal with on a daily basis. As we wrap up, Sister Tanisile, I've got about 30 seconds for you. What would you like to see happening from now onwards? Sister Tanisile, can you hear me? What would you like to see happening with your incident?
Yeah, ngifuna ukuthi kwenziwe ubulungiswa sesi, because lapha ngihlukumetekile kakhulu. Ngihlukumetekile nabantu abami, indodza yokuhamba lengayathi. Ngihlukumete phambi kwabantu abami. Ngifuna iticket emoto, so ngifuna ukuthi bangendele ubulungiswa. Because kumanje angikho emsebenzini ngithatha leave. Ngine stress.
Yeah, it's the trauma. It's the trauma. Sister Tanisile, siyabonga ukuthi usinike isikhathi sakho. Sister Tanisile, Dumisile Shabangu, rather, victim in that taxi incident where she was accosted by the taxi association marshal. Babu Kotole, your final thoughts, your message to taxi operators that are watching this discussion.
Engingacela nje mina ngicela ukuthi abakwaSantaco ke bethatha indawo yabo. Ekutheni akusuhlukumezeka abantu uyabona mayethi kunabantu abaplothwa bebekwe wena mawufika ngemoto umlift kanti sekuuye kushuthi bacushiwe abantu uSantaco ake uzame indlela osebenza ngayo ukuthi uvikela abantu ngendlela okwenzeka ngakhona ukuze iindustry ematekisi izohlonishwa ngoba makwenziwa ngalendlela hlukunyezwa abantu besifazane kuhlukunyezwa izingane angeke itaxi industry ize ikwazi ukuthi iqhubeke phambili kube ibusiness nohulumeni akazobona ukuthi ibusiness lele semthethweni.
Yeah, okay, a really good point. Mr. Mdleje, they're asking that Santaco really step in to ensure that some such incidents don't continue, so that even government is able to respect the industry. So Rebecca, I'm going to let you wrap up here. The steps moving forward, what Santaco does, and how you continue to communicate the message of, number one, non-violence. I mean, Mr. Mdleje said his life has been threatened, so I think that's one thing that really needs to be touched on, how taxi operators, the chairperson of an association, is threatening violence against someone who spoke out against the vulnerable. How do you deal with that? And then what's the steps that you take moving forward?
Now, two things. The first thing is that from this discussion, a reality is being identified. Criminals have seen a loophole in the operations of the taxi industry. And as a result, they are capitalizing on that. The people who are doing these acts are not honorable members of the industry. They are pure criminals, and law enforcement needs to come and work with us and help us get rid of them so that we can leave and remain with the people who care about the business of transporting South Africans from one point to another. And so that's exactly what we'll be doing. Hlokomela campaign, which is the flagship program within Santaco, does exactly that. The marshals that we have are supposed to be doing that, protecting the ordinary South Africans who are using the roads. We're going to continue to do that. We just need law enforcement to please complement our efforts.
Right. All right. Well, we really do appreciate the time of all of our guests. Thank you so much to Rebecca Pala, who's the national spokesperson for Santaco, speaking to us via Teams. Thanks as well to Sister Dumisile Shabangu, the victim in the incident that we see going viral on social media. And really, the hero of the incident, the man who spoke out, taxi operator, driver, as well as social media influencer, the hero for the story, Mr. Kotole Mdleje. Thank you so much for coming into studio and for speaking out.
Ngibonga kakhulu nje ukuthi ningibize ngiyacabanga ukuthi njengamanje izosolveka yonke indaba esemateksini bengahlukunyezwa abantu.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you call brave act of citizenry. You're watching The Agenda.